Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast, brought to you by Focusrite, supplying hardware and software products used by professional and amateur musicians, which enables the high-quality production of music. Focusrite, sound is everything. And now your hosts, Joey Sturgis, Joel Wanasek, and EYAL Levy.
Hey everyone, how you doing? I'm Joey Sturgis, and with me, as always, is EYAL Levy and Joel Wanasek.
That's us.
Yo, the Grammy nominations came out, which is exciting, I think. Did you guys look at it yet?
I didn't get a chance to look at everything, but I did see two things that made me happy. Number one was that August Burns Red is on there. And then number two, that somebody who is subscribed to what we do also got an engineer nomination.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go to the Private Producers Club right now and find who it is so that we can congratulate him on here. 1 second. Scrolling. Mr. Jack Mason officially got a Grammy nominee for engineering work on J. Cole's 2014 Forest Hills Drive. So congrats, Jack Mason.
That is awesome. I did not know that.
I did. Well, he just posted it 2 hours ago, so I guess he didn't know either.
I hope people start paying more attention to the Grammys. I think they really are trying to make a good effort to really fix what was wrong, because I know there was a couple years in a row where Best Metal Performance was basically a joke. And if you look at the look at the nominations this year, it's so much better. You've got August Burns Red, Cirque, Lamb of God, Seven Dust, and Slipknot. And that sounds pretty metal to me. I don't know about you guys, but...
Absolutely. I seem to remember that the joke in the metal category started with Metallica many, many years ago when they lost to Jethro Tull.
Right, yeah.
That was like the beginning of the downfall of metal and the Grammys. But I think that it's good that just the Grammys in general are trying to get it together, because music industry needs it, and there's so many other things for people to watch, so many other award shows, other types of award shows that people just care about more these days. It's a good thing that the Grammys is trying to get that quality back and become relevant again.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say was I think a lot of people need to maybe... I know the Grammy makes a really good effort at trying to educate people about how everything works, but, you know, things get lost in translation, and people only have a short attention span. But people should definitely try and go out and educate themselves on how the Grammys work, because there's still a lot of confusion, especially in some of the categories. And, for example, I wanted to clear up one of the categories. It's called Best Rock Album, and you'll see in this year's nominations, you've got James Bay sitting next to Slipknot. Now, most people are going to look at that and go, what the fuck? But the thing about the Best Rock Album is that it's the only category that can cover all heavy types of music. They don't have a Best Metal Album category. They only have a Best Rock Album category. And so within that circle or that realm lives metal, rock, and all forms of that stuff. So that's why you see James Bay sitting next to Slipknot. It's actually correct that those are there because you're representing the different types of music in that part of the world, that part of the music genre. So don't freak out when you see Death Cab for Cutie and Slipknot going up for the same award. It's just simply, you know, limited space for categories. You know, they can't have Best Rock Album, Best Hard Rock Album, Best Heavy Rock Album, Best Metal Album, Best Speed Metal Album.
Yeah, you know, I think if we're going to talk about the Grammys, we may as well get our guest in here.
Absolutely, and we don't know how to say his last name, but we're gonna learn together. Hey, welcome to the show, Fred.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so you were saying that your name is actually super common.
Yeah, the story of the last name Archambault, and so, you know, being born in Montreal and then growing up in the States, you know, it was a great way of people to make fun of you. But so I was doing this record Valiant Thor, and we were wrapping up, and I think the band was playing some shows in LA, and I went out to go see them, and we were on their RV, and it was the band, myself, and their booking agent, and this beautiful model by the name of Holiday. And obviously everybody wanted to talk to the model. I'm a married man, so it didn't really matter to me. But, you know, and she goes, and the band goes, "This is our producer, you know, Fred Archambault." And she was like, her eyes lit up. She goes, "Oh my God, you're an Archambault?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, fuck yeah, of course I am. And so she would not stop talking to me. You just feel like $1 million afterwards. You're like, all right, cool, I still got it. and then literally like a few months later, my wife and I are in Montreal and we're walking around, and I hadn't been back in a long time. And the Tower Records of Montreal is a store called Archambault Music. And so she thought I was of this family. And I was like, oh, that's why she was talking to me.
Yeah, that explains it for sure.
So for those of you listening who aren't familiar with Fred Archambault, he's worked with bands like Atreyu, Avenged Sevenfold, Alice Cooper, Eyes Set to Kill, and also, which I learned recently, you did live sound for Late Night with Carson Daly.
Well, yeah, it's not necessarily live sound. It's I guess I'll just jump into it real quick with that narrative is I record and mix back at my studio. So basically what the television show is, it's Last Call with Carson Daly. It's an NBC late night show, and I've been doing it now for about 4 seasons, and the seasons are kind of cut up into a fall and a spring semester as if like you were in school or something. So it's about 8 months of work, and the show isn't shot in a traditional studio like Fallon or any of the other late night shows because of the budget. So basically, we just roam around LA, sometimes New York, sometimes Texas, and we just grab interviews. And then the musical segment is, let's say a band, like tomorrow there's this band on Hollywood Records coming into town. They're playing the Fonda Theater. And I roll in with like a 48 channel kind of mobile Pro Tools system. I record their show. We film it, and then I bring it back. I usually have a couple of weeks, to kind of produce it and tweak it and mix it and kind of get it off. So it's not necessarily the live, but it's not like I'm doing live mixing, but I'm doing like a live recording, as it were. So that's been a really interesting, it's kind of like a nice side detour for my career of, making records and kind of A&Ring talent and doing kind of all the things that we do. It's kind of just fell in my lap, and it's been cool. And a side note, it's kind of like, I'll say this, I'm not afraid to say it, but it's kind of kept me away from doing some shitty records that I would have taken. There's one band, there's maybe, hopefully you guys haven't worked with them, but there's a metal band from LA that's female fronted, and they came to me very early, and I was like,
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't get it. I get it to a certain extent. I wish them luck, but I don't want to be associated with this. Yeah. So, and they do well, they kill it, but it's just not my thing. So it kind of it's kind of shielded me, and then it's kind of made it like, I just take the money from the show and I just reinvest it into my career and reinvest it into unsigned artists. And so it's kind of been a blessing and a curse, but the blessing outweighs the curse as far as workflow. And with that show, I mix about, no joke, 200 songs a year,
Wow.
plus
That's awesome.
my other songs. So I'm up to 300 songs a year plus. So it gets your chops going, and that's the cool thing. And I was talking to Joey about it when I saw him out in LA was, that's what I love about what you guys are doing. And now branching out with this Nail the Mix and Unstoppable Recording Bootcamp or, website is we all get stuck in these ruts. And especially when I'm working with the volume of work that I'm doing, you have your thing. You're like, okay, do this, do that, in and out. And Joel, I was watching what you were doing on this Nail the Mix thing, and I was just like, I got to rethink whole. I was like, fuck, man, I got to rethink some shit.
Why do you say that?
Well, I love, the one thing that I'm trying to incorporate in my thing is the way you're working with the bass DI and splitting it and, into kind of crossover frequencies and doing that stuff. I was like, oh, that's genius. I never thought of doing that. And I started doing that the last week. I've done 10 mixes with it. It's really cool. It's just it's because the bass sometimes is just okay, let's just put the bass in and then move on. But now it's let me tailor some cool bass shit going on, and it's
more control.
Yeah,
more control.
And that technique, Joel, that you showed, really, I was like, okay, this is hip, this is cool, this is exactly. It's giving me more control and more of a blend. It was really, things like that. I'm still going through it because it's really long and it has so much info, but it's helped me kind of get out of my rut a little bit,
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
That's great to hear. That actually brings up the question, how would you go about bass before seeing that? How would you get it to both stand out and also provide the thunder?
Well, and I'm going to talk about the live recording multi-track stuff that I was doing is, they tend to give me a DI, which is always great. I find them the mic end of, if they mic a bass rig. And, here's the other thing. Hopefully the mic is in the fucking right spot, which, some of these guys just don't do it, or maybe they mic it to where it works for them, but there's been other times when I literally walk on stage and I just kind of politely like just move the microphone and I kind of look at them. They're, oh, hey, thanks, man. Thanks for doing it. It's like, yeah, I was pointing at the fucking snare drum. Yeah. But so with the DI, so I tend to take the DIs and the live thing to give me clarity. I tend to do away with the microphone unless they're doing something really cool with it, like they're putting an effect on there that I'm not getting with the DI that's very, proprietary. So I'll take that and just really, heavily kind of low pass or high cut that. So I kind of get some of that ambience from the thing. But, I've just been like, for the DI, I've just been, okay, LA2A, maybe some amplitude, try some different SVT modeling. And then, I hate to do it and I hate to admit it, but the Chris Lord Algae, like the audio suite plugins, like they're actually kind of rad. I feel like cheating every time I put them on, but
I think they've got their place.
Yeah, and so that's kind of been my go-to, is that thing sometimes just really freaking works really well. But now, so I'll do that, and I'll do my normal thing, and now, like I have a mix-up right now that I was working on, a band called Rat-a-Tat. They're kind of like an instrumental kind of thing, and I'll do my normal thing, and then I'll duplicate 2 tracks, and I'll do the thing that Joel was hipping me to, and then I just kind of see like, okay, is this new thing working, or is my old thing working? And right now the new thing's starting to win out, so that's kind of how I was treating bass, like really working with the DI to help give me clarity and to kind of make it rise above. But again, some of this stuff, like some of the indie rock stuff, some of the rock stuff, the bass just kind of needs to sit there and not really peek its head out sometimes,
Yeah.
Unless of course they're doing a high octave kind of fill thing, but yeah. So that's kind of, and that kind of applies to records too. Sometimes the bass just needs to sit there and provide that kind of low end thunder and not really get in the way. And other times you get some great bass players and it's like, cool, let's make this shine a little bit more.
I find that on heavy records specifically, it's really important to use that trick, because sometimes if you don't, it gets very difficult to get a good blend of the heavy guitars with the bass, and it starts to stick out like a sore thumb in a weird way. It's kind of the thing of having bass that's way too clean on a metal record doesn't usually work, at least in my experience. So I think that that's a really, really great trick. That's interesting to me that it's new to you, considering the amount of work you do, because I think that to us, that's like a super commonplace trick.
Yeah. And I think, the trick that I was doing to kind of get some of that like marriage between low end and guitars was a third distorted track. I would, if I was producing the project, or if I was even mixing, I'd reamp it, taking the DI and going through like a Bogner Uberschall or, 5150 through a bass cab to kind of get that kind of distortion. But now with that kind of splitting up the DI into these different EQ spectrums, kind of like multi-banding it in a way, I feel like, well, that replaces me, doing the extra, guitar cab trick,
Yeah.
Well, congrats on your Pensados Award for the Carson Daly Show.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So let's talk a little bit about, how you got started. You're based in LA, which we all know is a pretty social area and requires a lot of networking to really get anywhere and do anything. So can you speak to that a little bit and maybe provide some kind of insight to our listeners who might be trying to come up in a town that's pretty competitive as well?
Yeah, like how did you do it without just being a total cheeseball? Like I know, go to NAMM and those cheeseballs just bombard you.
You know what, dude? Like, you guys are bringing up a thing I wrestle with every day, and I talk to my friends about it as well. And it's like, how do you kind of, self-promote without feeling like a fucking used car salesman? You know what I mean?
It's tough.
and you don't want to come off as desperate and like, I need work, and I'll do this, I'll do that. So it's really like, I've always believed in, and maybe this is being too romantic, but I always believed in, if you do good work, it will leave a trail, and then that trail will find you.
But sometimes you need to light that trail up.
Yes, and that's difficult. And I think, I'm probably the worst person at networking and schmoozing. I really am. But I'll try to do it. I don't think there is a right thing. I think the better way to do it is take control of your online presence and your online narrative, your digital narrative, which is something that if you kind of Google me, you're not going to find too much. And I'm trying to change that. I came from an old school mentality of and some of the managers I've had, they're like, well, we don't want you online. We don't want people to find you that easy. We don't want people to know what projects you're doing, because it was so competitive. If you were doing a band and let's say you were in pre-production, they'd be fucking other producers sniffing around if they knew you were doing it, And wow. I remember doing a record for Roadrunner, and literally there was a producer in the parking lot on the way out talking to the band. Hey man, if you
holy shit.
I heard it's not going so well in there.
Heard you guys couldn't get through bass. Let me mix it.
I heard some issues with some drums. But I think that's something that I battle with, and I don't really have a thing other than if you kind of network and you socialize from a real honest place. And I always tell bands that I'm hanging with, or if I'm at NAMM and doing the thing, I'm just really more interested in their story. I'm more interested in the gear. I'm not interested in getting an endorsement or schmoozing that. It's hey, what are you guys up to? And if I feel like both of our self-interests are going to align, hey, let's do something. And the thing that helps, and I wish I did this years and years ago, was having my own facility where I can say to a band, hey, why don't you come up for a couple of days and let's do a track. No strings attached. Let's not get managers involved. Let's just do a track and see if we like working together. And to be honest, that's a day or two of my time. Dude, I'd rather have that than running around town looking at shows, paying for parking, buying drinks, buying people dinner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like that kind of if you have your own facility, which I think in this day and age is super important, whether it's a bedroom or whether it's a converted garage or whatever, that to me, it's hey, let's do something, let's, and I think everyone's usually, pretty receptive to it.
That's interesting that you say that, because one thing that I always preach and we always preach is giving people value in advance. And that goes, whether you're trying to sell a physical product or a service like recording, or trying to teach people how to record or whatever, these days you do need to give them something that will make their life better before they're going to become a client or customer generally.
I was going to say, I think that's an amazing point you brought up too, Fred, because I know a lot of kids and stuff that are oh yeah, well, how do I get bands in the studio? And you're well, record some stuff for free, go to shows, scrap them up, get them in, form a relationship. And they're well, I'm not going to do that, man. And you're well, come on. And then you look at a rap sheet like you have, and then you're doing it at the highest level. What does that tell you? It works.
Yeah, and I think it's always about, and to go back to giving value, you're always selling yourself on the project. So you're going to campaign to get the record or to work with a band, whether they have a budget or not. And then you're going to fight to keep the gig. And then it's a fight to get paid. And it's a fight to your royalties. You know what I mean? It's really, it's an industry loaded with minefields. And if you don't have a passion for it, you're going to come up short. Again, if you're not willing to go out to a show and, corner a band and say hi and say, hey, it's kind of a douchey, I'm a record producer, that's kind of stupid. It was hey, I got a studio. If you want to record some songs, come on up. I really love what you guys were doing. And I did that a handful of times, and those have been my biggest successes. The most awkward thing. I see a band, I'm
same here, actually.
This band's fucking cool. And I did their record, and then it led to something else, That's the important thing that I have to instill into everybody. An internship working for free will lead to something else. Working with a band that maybe didn't work out, or maybe, okay, this is not really, it's going to lead to something else, and that thing's going to lead to this. And then you're just going to look back and you have this trail. And then to me, and I think Joey, you kind of really have this thing, is consistency. That's the thing now I'm starting to strive for, is the consistent performance. Whether you're coming at it as a co-writer to write a song, like you guys had Kane Churko, the consistency of what his material is going to be the consistency of what you guys bring to a project, and then the consistency of, hopefully what I can bring. That is what's going to make you successful.
I mean, even with something like this podcast, we need to make sure, of course, that it's good, but that it's coming out every single week, we said it would, or people will lose faith in what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I feel like, because I think back in the day, and I've had some big records, like, to me, I thought, like, cool, you get into this business and, I'll get that Linkin Park record and then it's Easy Street. And I kind of came on the tail end of that, and it doesn't really exist where you're going to do a record and it's going to sell 10 million copies, So to me now it's about, like, how do you redefine success, but also, like, just how do you just become consistent where everything you touch is going to perform to a point where is really reliable, and that labels and managers and artists are going to want to work with you. And I think that is, it's all about the singles, doubles, and not the home runs, grand slams,
Speaking to your example, actually, about Linkin Park, Josh Newell, who is a good friend of mine and a great engineer who's done a bunch of their records, and he's done a bunch of other great stuff like Avril Lavigne. He's the perfect example. You would think that with those credits, he would no longer need to push for work, but he's always pushing for work. He's doing Linkin Park right now, and he's still pushing for work.
Josh, I remember I left NRG while he was interning. It was like, oh, the kid with the piercings. But yeah, that's exactly. I love Josh. Josh is fantastic, and that's just case in point. Like, he's killing it. Like, he does these cool, like, I hope I'm not mispronouncing, like, intronaut records. Like, he does these really cool, like, intricate, like, kind of stoner rock, prog rock records, and at the same time he's working with Ben Moody and doing these huge fucking pop records. It's that to me, it's like, I was talking to Joey in LA a little bit. It's like, that's the next generation. That's the voices, the storytellers I want to champion and kind of bring to the forefront. And that's what I feel like you guys are doing. You guys are fucking doing it. So, what am I doing? But so that is, Josh is a great example of that, where you're going to work with that dude. You're going to pull from all those experiences. Like, that would be cool. For me as an artist, I'd want to work with him, because it's like, cool, like, show me all the secrets that, the Max Martin secrets, show me all
absolutely.
And then, so it's really cool.
So have you had, I know you talked a little bit about, kind of the live sound, which isn't actually live sound, but, remixing a live recording or whatever. Yeah. Do you find big differences between doing that versus studio work? Because, we all expect sort of a modern production nowadays to sort of have those comps and the edits and the punch-ins and all that. What do you notice the differences, the big difference? The
big difference is, there's so many. The big difference to me is when you're producing a record, mixing or engineering, you're really kind of like, you're hired by the artist trusts you, the artist is working with you for a reason, right? Now, when I'm doing this thing, it's a union position and it's kind of a shotgun marriage. It's like they're forced to use me and they have no clue who I am. And if they were to do a little bit of searching, the words Avenged Sevenfold come up. And when you're an indie pop artist like Grimes, who probably has no fucking clue who that is, or you're like, what's another bad example? When you're the band called Naked and Famous and they see like, oh, the metal dude's going to be mixing your stuff, the trust just goes out the window. So I'm fighting for the trust. But the main difference creatively is you're creating when you're making the record. I'm recreating. And what that recreation is a moving target. So a band like M83, they were bringing the record to the stage and they really wanted it to sound like the record. And let's say I'm working with an artist like, there's so many, like Jake Bugg or, any other artist. It might be kind of this weird thing where the record's completely different from the live show. And so, okay, now what do I do? So I have to interpret it. So it's more like a reinterpretation instead of a creation. So it's a different hat. And I don't have the comps to choose from. And to be honest, sometimes the vocals don't tune up because tuning a live vocal is really tough, and I've tried a couple of tricks of filtering low end out of it because there's just so much swimming around a vocal live. You have like the drums, you have playback, and if they're on monitor wedges, you got like an in-tune keyboard but an out-of-tune vocal. So you tune the vocal and it's like, well, now the keyboard's out of tune. You kind of have to make those decisions.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of like editing and performance tweaks that I face. And to be honest, the prepping of a live track is way longer than mixing it. And the other thing that I can kind of do sometimes, and it saved me, is like I record the sound checks. And so I was doing this thing with the Crystal Method, and they were doing this like kind of big anniversary show, and they were doing all their hits with like all the original singers. So they were doing like Trip Like I Do with some of the Filter guys, and then they were doing some of their newer songs with all the original singers.
That's
and we
sweet.
had this girl, Dia Frampton, who was singing on their new single. And at soundcheck, it was awesome. It was like, it was one of those lightning in a bottle things. We're like, wow, this is going to be rad. And unfortunately, at showtime, it just didn't translate as well. Like, she was still great, but it was a little off key. And then she fucked up the intro. It went twice as long. And so it was like, I was like, oh, what do I do? I was like, oh, wait a minute. I have the sound check. Let me fly sound check in. And that was really helpful, So I can comp like that, very limited. And I can tune kind of limited. And then I can also re-sing. I've re-sung some background vocals. I've replayed like violin parts I'll replay or horn parts I'll replay. And not necessarily replace, but like kind of like sneak in there and give it like a nice fullness. And
Yeah.
So those are the type of production tricks and things and recreation things, and try to figure out, does the band want the record or do they want this middle ground of recreation? And that's what I'm always battling. And then also battling the trust issue, like, hey, trust me to do this really great job for you guys.
What I really like about what you're doing and what you said there is it's kind of the approach that I like to have, which is, I think in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, it really doesn't matter how you get there as long as you get there. I really do like the approach of adding a guitar note here and there, or adding a background vocal, or sneaking in a little instrument here just to help things out. Now, you don't want to do that if you're working with like Dave Grohl, because that's just, you don't need to. But with some things need a little help. I love when the producer gets in there and does that. And there's I can't think of the guy's name, but he mixed the new Paramore album, and part of his approach was to actually add all kinds of instruments, and I don't think they were even aware of it at first.
Well, that's my question to you guys is, like, with every new project, every new band, aren't you testing the limits as to what you can kind of add in the soundscape? That's what I always feel like. It's like, can I add this and see if I can get away with it? And then if they're like, yeah, that's rad. And then you start really opening the floodgates. Well, if you like that, then check this out,
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
Though I do have to say there are some older school metal bands that I've worked on that you can't get any ideas in. Like bands that have been around for like 30 years or something, it's not happening. Like they're but in general, yeah, totally. I'm wondering, like, with all that prep you have to do, are you a one-man show, or do you have an intern or an assistant?
Yeah, no, I've been looking for that kind of help. And yeah, no,
that's pretty impressive.
You do bring, yeah. Well, it's fatiguing, is what it is.
He's a machine.
You're telling me about something that, yeah, I've been trying to. It's so funny. Like Sunday night, last night, I just got these emails from Gary Newman, who I've worked with in the past, and he emailed me. He's like, "Oh, mate, like last minute, I got 4 records that need to get mixed by January," and I'm like, cool, let's do it. And then, I still have a couple weeks of TV show mixes, and then I'm in pre-production for this record that I'm doing for Universal. So that's going to be part of the budget, is getting an assistant in to prep tracks, But yeah,
it helps.
It's got to, right? Yeah.
Takes a while to get them dialed in, but oh my God, it's a game changer.
How many instruments do you play? You just mentioned quite a few.
Well, I jack of all trades, master of none. I came up as a guitar player, and I loved, like, I came from like old school metal shred stuff, real poppy shred stuff like Vi and Whitesnake and AC/DC and all that kind of stuff. And I tried to be that player, and I just couldn't shred. And so I went to Berkeley and I studied jazz guitar, and I did pretty well. And then I realized, I was like, you know what? All these other guys like grew up, they know all the standards in all 12 keys. Like, it's not part of my blood. I just kind of want to rock. So, and then I realized I really just wasn't a fast player. And then I heard this Bill Frisell record, Nashville, and he doesn't play above like 70 BPMs. I was like, oh, fuck.
He's phenomenal.
Yeah, so as a guitar player, I feel like, and then when I left Berkeley, and I don't know if you had the same feeling, was you kind of had to unlearn.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually really careful about what I would let them teach me. I didn't do very well academically overall because there were certain things that I just refused to go into because I felt like everybody was playing elevator music, and I was looking at the dudes who were like in fourth year who had gone through all these courses, and yeah, they could play, but I totally didn't want to sound like them at all in any way, shape, or form. I did not want to poison myself with that garbage. So I was very, very choosy about what classes I would go to. And so I did great in the ones I went to. Of course, I failed the ones I didn't go to.
Yeah.
But that saved me from having to unlearn too much stuff.
Now, what years were you there?
I believe, man, like 98 through 2001 or something.
Okay, so we were there at the same time.
Oh, shit.
I was there from 96, 97 to 99, 2000 maybe? So yeah, we definitely passed ways somewhere.
That's awesome.
Interesting.
Yeah, Adam D was there at the time. I don't know if you were friends with him.
No, but John Mayer was in my ear training class. I'd never met Adam D at Berkeley, though.
Yeah, and then you know who else I had in my class was I had Tony Bennett's daughter in my class, Antonio
Nice.
Bennett.
So you know who else was there when I was there? It was Gus G.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he was there for literally one semester, and then he got the fuck out. So
Yeah.
did you finish or did you drop out?
So funny. Yeah, I dropped out so close.
Good.
So towards the end, I became I became a MP&E student, and I was already interning.
That's music production and engineering for anyone that doesn't know.
Exactly, and at Berkeley, you can go to the college, but then you have to apply to this even smaller program, and I guess it's a little bit more competitive. So I got in, but at that time I was interning at the studio called New Alliance, which I want to tell that story because it's really important. And I was also interning at a studio called Q Division, and I was working on records like Jane Doe by Converge, and a bunch of records that you guys have talked about.
So you know Kurt.
So I knew Kurt at that time, and then I was mixing live sound for this off-Broadway show called Blue Man Group, and playing in a band that was signed. So it was all these things kind of culminated towards the end, and I left, and I'm literally 5 credits shy. And when I went to the Pensado Award thing, I talked to this Berkeley guy who's like the head of the MP&E department, and I was like, "Hey man, I'm a student there, and I never finished, but I did learn some stuff, and it was cool." And he totally like hustled me. He goes, "Well, we have this online degree completion, and." And I'm sitting in this meeting with Joey before Thanksgiving. It's like a heavy like music industry meeting, and I'm literally getting an email like, "Hey, maybe you should finish your degree." And I'm like, I'm also kind of voting on some Grammys right now. I don't know if I really need this, but
Yeah, perhaps not the most wisest use of your time right there.
yeah. So, but I wanted to go.
You just sell pick them.
Yeah. So I wanted to go back, when it comes down to like people getting a start, and I just always hark on the internship, and that's New Alliance. Like when I was at Berkeley, I did this class called the Studio for Musician. And part of it was you had to book studio time. That was like your final project. You had to like form a fake band and go around studios in Boston and book time, and like do a budget and all that kind of shit. And I saw all these studios in Boston. I was like, this is fucking cool. I just rather work here and, intern here. So I interned at this place called New Alliance, which was right behind Fenway Park in this like dungy building.
Man, I lived across the street from that.
Okay, so yeah, it was the I forget what it was called, but they had a bunch of rehearsal rooms there, and a bunch of bands rehearsed there. There was a few studios there.
Yeah, that's where my band rehearsed.
And so I started working at the studio called New Alliance, and it wasn't much. It was a basement studio with 24-track 2-inch and then a 16-track 1-inch and a Soundcraft 6000 console. And it just happened they would be recording all the kind of the cooler stoner rock bands. Boston had like the stoner rock thing, and then they had the Cambridge more heady poppy stuff. And so one of the bands that came in, and I was interning, working for free, and just any spare time I had, I was at the studio. And I learned how to cut tape. I learned how to align machines. I learned, all the names of the microphones. I learned how to deal with musicians. I met so many people. That's how I met like all the Blue Man Group people. And there was this producer, Andrew Murdoch, who was cutting demos for this band called Godsmack. And so I worked on, and those demos became the first Godsmack record. And so working with Andrew and interning him, he became the super famous rock producer, moved out to LA, and I followed him out here after my band broke up, and that's how I ended up working with Avenged. So that's the exact, and not to like be a dick about it, but like, that's a record that I still get royalties on, and it was enabled me to buy a house. If I didn't fucking intern, I would have never made all these connections. So that to me is super important. And that's why I always say, like, people are like, how do I do it? It's like, dude, find a studio. It doesn't have to be big or small, and just be willing not to be a fucking dumbass. And you know what I mean? Like, taking initiative. It's a lot of taking the trash out and cleaning coffee cups, and then, laying in samples and session prep. But that stuff really pays in spades. It's like an investment of time. It's like going to a show and recording a band for free. Hopefully it'll pay off later.
Yeah, this morning I had a studio here with a guy he rents across the hall, and he's got his own studio and I have mine. So we kind of share the upper floor of a building. And he was in here this morning complaining how he needs a new intern. This kid that was here last week is all talk. He's not going to show up. His other guy is lazy. He doesn't do this. And this other kid, this and that. And we're sitting here, we're like, man, it'd be cool to get somebody in this building who actually isn't a complete idiot, who can show up on time and actually wants to be here.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's also, like, and I think you guys would agree, like, isn't that part of the business, though, too? Like,
yeah.
Like, I when I moved out to LA, I was a runner at NRG Studios, and I took a big step back from being, like, producing my own records out in Boston and being a second engineer at bigger places to be, getting food for the dudes in lit, So,
I mean, it's like working the mailroom when you're trying to get up the corporate ladder. There's entry-level positions in any line of work. It's just how it goes.
Exactly. And we had, a group of guys, I would say, like, I quote unquote, my class of guys, Josh Newell was a part of it towards the end. And there was a couple other guys, and it was amazing to see the dropout, like guys that were just working on fucking huge records. And just like a year later, like, yeah, no, it's not for me. And I was just like, fuck you, I would die to be in your position. I remember there was this one guy who became like Don Gilmore's like go-to, like second engineer, and then he was being groomed to be his engineer. And he was working on the second Linkin Park record, like all these huge records. And he was just in the corner reading a book. He'd throw a couple patches in the morning and then just read a book in the corner, and not be involved. And then now, he moved to San Diego to clean boats or whatever. But it's like, the business kind of like will separate the wheat from the chaff, as it were. You know what I mean? I think that's just part of the process with interns. Like, some are going to come back and some aren't. We get tested every day in this business, and I think it's like, it's not like the greatest dudes that end up, but it's the dudes that show up again. that become like, I know right. I'm not great, but I just show up. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I mean, not to compare what we do to the military at all, because clearly it's a whole different set of pressures. But, they have very similar sorts of vetting processes that, they're trying to make people fail so that the people who do actually make it through are the ones who you would want making it through. I feel like almost like the intern process is a similar sort of thing. Get them doing some super difficult edits, laying samples and all that. And just by virtue of giving them that, you'll end up with people that are good because everyone else will be gone within 4 days.
Yeah. And it's also like the people that take the initiative. Like, sometimes I'll have interns, kind of runner assistants, and a big part of their job description when I'm in production here at the house is kind of client services, meaning like, make sure the coffee machine is stocked, make sure the trash is pulled, like, empty out the ashtrays, that kind of stuff. And the dudes that do that without me telling them are the guys I keep around and try to keep around for the next record when I have a budget for this and that.
Isn't that the truth?
You know what Josh Newell, back to Tim again, what he told us is the way that he got the Linkin Park gig was because when he was an assistant or an intern, he was the only guy who got their food order right.
Yeah.
and they figured, if you can't get the food order right, how are you going to get drum edits right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what, especially at NRG, that's what you were instilled with, was this attention of detail. And if you didn't get exactly the food order right, or stocking the food in the morning, you weren't going to get the patch right, you weren't going to get the tube mic set up right. Yeah, it all kind of, that attention to detail is really what, in the long run, really kind of, you fight to kind of keep in record making, because it's such a long, tedious, like very focused job. And it's like, if you miss that, oh shit, the mic pre's crapping out, and you lose a take or whatever, so that attention to detail will be with you for the rest of your career,
So considering that there's less studios than, before when you were coming up, what do you recommend that kids nowadays do in order to get internships? I mean, there's far less good internships available than there used to be, and far more kids going for them.
Well, that's the issue, isn't it? Right?
Oh, yeah.
I get hit up quite a bit, I think it's more about, finding like, if I were really wanting to be, I think it's about finding, okay, this is the music I love. This is what I want to be working on. And then finding that person that works on it and doing some research. Where are they working? Where are they? Do they have their own facility? Is it, in their house, or are they renting it? And so I think at the end of the day, there's less big commercial facilities, but there's way more islands out there. Meaning like, I'm an island, this person's an island, we're all kind of scattered, and we all have these little digital workflow rooms, but in essence, there's actually, the separation creates more people working, so I think it's about just finding those. That's what I would do. And then the thing that I didn't have growing up is stuff like this podcast and all these YouTube clips, and all this kind of stuff. So you can really gain up some knowledge. And I get some interns in sometimes, and it's like, they do some slamming shit. They're like, man, that stuff actually sounds fucking good. Show me how you do that.
Well, hey, we're going to jump off this topic real quick here. We're getting near the end, and we want to run you through the rapid fire, which Joel's going to lead.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to rapid fire off a bunch of cool stuff, and you can tell me your choice for either tracking or mixing. And if you have any cool, really secrets of proprietary stuff that you do not want to share, we totally respect that, and thank you for playing.
But if you do want to share it, that's even better.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, so kick drum.
Here's the one thing that I've been digging. So Beta 52, scooping out, 300-400 always helps. But here's a new mic that it's called the Mondo mic. It's made by Avitone. Not that many dudes know about it, but I tried it out and it was fucking rad. It's kind of pre-EQ'd, really aggressive. That's kind of been my go-to. That, and then the other trick on the mix end is DBX 160s. And
yes,
the trick with them, because I've had a lot of 160s and they've gathered dust, and I rediscovered them maybe 3 years ago again, is low, for me, I don't know if everyone else would agree with me, is low ratios, like 2-to-1, 5-to-1, and just kissing it. And it's just like, that to me, I'm like, oh, when I started doing that, I was like, oh, fuck yeah. Because I was always like 4-to-1 and really kind of compressing it. And I was like, what the fuck's, why is everyone talking about 160s? They suck. And then I started like maybe using them a little bit more conservatively. And I was like, oh, these are fucking rad. So
nice. Like that.
It's great on snares too.
Kick and snares. Yeah. That's on snares. I have a set of, Joel, I don't know if you do this. I was looking at your studio and you seem to have a lot of, maybe all you guys have a lot of external stuff, but I have external DBX 160 XTs that live on the snare, and then I have external VU old school guys that live on the kicks. So yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, that's sick. I don't have a 160, but I'm tempted because EYAL is always telling me how great they are. I usually go for like distressors.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have, it's so funny, I have a distressor, I'm looking at it today actually, and I just can't get my head around it, and maybe I got to relearn how to use that thing. Because I noticed that you were using them a lot, and a lot of guys are I just can't get my head around it,
Well, I'm going to go distressor hardcore and nail the mix.
Oh, cool. I'm looking forward to that.
So, all right, let's talk about room mics.
Room mics, it's like, do they get used?
Hey, mute is a valid choice.
They do on my productions.
Yeah, it's so funny because like I've been it's like you try to work on them and that's probably where the most expensive microphone is in the room, if you're at a commercial studio. But I haven't had much luck, but I will say I'm tending to favor ribbon microphones for that. So Royer makes all those cool ribbon microphones. And then if you can get your hands on, if you're at a big studio like an M49 or those old Omni tube microphones, I really like those. But I tend to go for stuff that's darker and low gain. Again, scooping 800 out, kind of getting the boxiness of a room out. And then the thing that I do at my house, I have a small living room, is I've been doing 2 SM7s actually. So that's actually because SM7s kind of are low output, kind of a little bit darker at times. So I just mixed something this weekend that I had the SM7s in, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But to be honest, sometimes mute is the thing that happens because I have so much other ambience going with verbs and stuff and recreating that. And if the tempos are fast, I personally just can't find room for them, you know. No pun intended.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. How about heavy distorted rhythm guitars?
Tracking a 121 and a 57. I know that's the cliche thing that a lot of people are doing, but that to me works. It's a great balance. And then, to be honest, the thing that is going to help you with distorted guitars is low cut or high pass, being aggressive with that. And then you guys kind of turned me on. I started putting L1s now on my heavy guitars.
Yeah.
I never was doing that, and now you guys like hit me to that shit, and I'm like, fuck yes. And,
we like our L1s, don't we?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, you gotta, and I didn't do this for a long time. I started doing this in 2007, is tracking a DI with my rhythm guitars, just from an editing standpoint. Even if I don't reamp the guitar, it gives me that transient look in your DAW. So that is, heavy guitars, you know, grab that DI too. And here's my last thing about heavy guitars. I was talking to Joey about it was, dude, the Sims, you know, like Kemper or whatever you're going to use, Pod Farm, whatever, like having a guitar player track through that is a total different reaction than having them play through an amp. I've noticed they like really dial into their right hand more, and it's really cool. And so I started doing that on the Atreyu record, and it was a total night and day difference how they were playing rhythm guitars, you know. And then if I wanted to reamp, I would, but yeah, I think the guitar DI, which is probably like you guys old news, you know, it's like, oh, of course we've fucked with those for years. But to me, like the guitar DI is like the most unsung hero of guitar recording, I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right. How about vocals? Singing vocals.
Singing vocals is going to be, for me, I have this old stay level, this gate stay level. And
nice.
It's the fucking shit. So I bought this thing when I was doing Wake in the Fallen. I bought it online in 2003, and it came to me and it just wasn't cool at all. And I brought it to the studio tech. I was like, hey man, can you check this out? And he goes, it checked out okay. And it literally sat in this storage locker of mine for like, a good almost, 8 years. And I was going to sell it. And then I found this guy locally, David Kolka, and he redid it. And the thing's butter. It's like, it's my go-to. And unfortunately, it's that Verimute tube compression. It has a 6386 tube in it, which is the same tube that, the Fairchilds used. So there's very limited life to it. So it's, I try to turn it off if I'm not using it. But that to me that's my one secret weapon. And then, and then shooting out the mic too, like SM7, I have a Manley ref mic that I tend to like. And then I also just bought this Dave Perlman U47 copy called a TM1. So I have kind of a little bit of a different flavor. I have more of the hi-fi Sony 800 vibe in the Manley, and then I have more of the vintage tube thing. So that's my thing with vocal. Again, low passing it, and then on mix, I tend to favor like the Slate Dragon or 1176, like the purple MC 77s.
Cool.
I'll go hardware in that and I just fucking pin it, just like, be really aggressive with it. And that to me is like the cool, like jacket on the vocal, as it were.
Yeah, awesome. Manly compression. All right, one more. We'll do 2-bus. Anything cool on your mix bus?
Yeah, 2-bus for me is a Manley Verimute, which I abuse the fuck out of. Like I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed to say it, and I think why it works for me is because I mix digitally, and then this darkens things up a little bit. But I have it set up. It's in compress, but my settings are almost like a limiter. So it's like the output is pinned. It's a pretty fast release. I'm just looking at it right now. Super slow attack. The side chain filters are in. And I'm doing about 2 dB of reduction, but that to me is like, I put that on and I was like, okay, there's a difference here. And I'm embarrassed because I think I use it wrong, but fuck, it sounds good. And then it goes through a pair of like Tube Tech EQs.
Nice.
the Tube Tech ones, the PE1Cs. And again, very broad, low end boost at 60 hertz, and then maybe 3 cycles or 3K, boost that. And then here's the one secret weapon I have. I'm sorry that it's taking me a while here, but
no, that's great.
Is the SPL Vitalizer. This is a fucking cool piece of gear. And I was doing some artist development, and I lost this artist to a major label and to kind of a bigger producer. But I was still doing kind of the other songs and whatever. And so I was getting these mixes back from this other dude, and I was like, what the fuck? These sound so wide and so deep. Like, what the fuck is this guy doing to his mixes? It's ungodly what he's doing. And then I looked up, because everything's online, right? So I looked up his setup, and he was mixing through this SPL mix stream. And on the mix stream, there's a knob called stereo enhancement. And so I started investigating all this, Waves has an S1, I think it's called.
Yeah.
So I started investigating.
Shuffler.
Yeah. So I started investigating all this stuff, and then SPL just makes this unit called the Vitalizer, which basically is an EQ with a stereo expander in it. And it's if you get the piece of gear, if you get the plug-in, you're going to misuse it because you're just going to be like, oh my God, yes, wide. You just want everything wide. And I think it's just an MS encoder is probably what it does. But that to me it adds that 20% or 10% of finishing. And that stuff, all the stuff I'm talking about goes to mastering. And the only thing that doesn't go to mastering is I'll put a maximizer from UA or the Steven Slate FGX. I'll mix into that so I know what the end result limiting is going to do.
Are you using the tube vitalizer or the solid state?
Yes, I have the tube one, the tube version.
You're making me gear lost here. I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, no, and even if you can get your hands on the solid state one, I bet that one's cool. I know a lot of dudes, if it's not on the mix bus, put it on your guitar bus or something like that. To get
sick, yeah.
Extra width out of guitars, and then you can keep drums a little bit more centered. But yeah, it's to me, it's that's my secret weapon. I'm not scared to share it because I think some guys will like it, some guys won't, but it really helped me. And it also has this low end button. What is it called? Or it's called bass compression and bass sound, right? And I don't use the compression end of it, but I use the soft end. So if you turn it to the left, you get the soft, and what it does is subharmonic synth. So it adds a low octave to everything. It's really cool. And so you use it sparingly, and then so in productions where I was adding sub bass and choruses to make it bigger, now I don't do that because it's I'm going to get that low end from this knob, It's a cool little trick that to me adds the low octave stuff. And then if I have too much of it, mastering will shave it off. So I'm not worried about it.
Very nice. So we have a couple questions from the audience, if you don't mind. This one actually is something that I'm curious about as well. And I guess if you don't feel like answering it, I completely understand. But Jordan Embleton and myself were wondering, what was the approach towards working with Portnoy on Nightmare, given the really awful circumstance? Did you have to do certain things to keep the vibe productive?
Well, I didn't work on the Portnoy record, but the little bit that I did work on that record.
Oh, that's what All Music said.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm listed as an engineer on that one. Maybe because I did some pre-pro, some stuff with that. But, I will say that going into that was a very difficult time for everybody. Jimmy had passed away right around this time of year. It's actually coming up. I think it's on the 27th, 28th of December. And I think he is such an amazing writer and amazing drummer that I think it was fuck, what do we do now? So I think the Portnoy thing was, I know that Jimmy was a fan of Mike. I think Mike, because everything was tracked demo-wise on an E-kit at Matt's house. Oh, okay. So all the parts were there, right? All the songs were there, and then they took a Christmas break, and they were going to start in January, right?
Yeah.
They took the Christmas break, and unfortunately, Jimmy passed, and so all the parts were there, even some of the vocal parts that they ended up flying into the record. So I think Portnoy did a great job at copying. Jimmy had a cool swing in his cymbal hand or his hi-hat hand that was really unique. And I think Mike did a good job at copying that. And then the story I heard, Matt was telling me this, was because when they were mixing, they emailed me hey, what are those drum samples you use? And I was using those SSD samples at the time. And it's yeah, here they are. It's yeah, we need them because the kick drums, Mike doesn't play as heavy through those double kick patterns that Jimmy did. So that was the one thing that I think Mike really had to like focus in, and maybe didn't hit out of the park from what I understand, but everything else he hit out of the park. And I think he did his best to pay tribute. There's a lot of, obviously they're not working together. There was some other maybe bullshit that happened later on the tour, but that's really none of my business. But I worked a little bit on that in the pre-pro, and then as they were touring, I was working with Mike on like show tapes and backing track stuff. But that's a tough one because Jimmy was just freaking great.
I figure that when you lose someone that's that awesome, really the only thing you can possibly do if you're going to keep going is get someone, if you can swing it, get somebody legendary or someone that you can't really argue with.
Yeah, and I think, the trick with that is you don't want it to outshine what the material is too. You don't want it to be the Mike Portnoy show, which maybe it did become because he's pretty great at promoting himself. So I think of him every day, and I think of the guys every day of like, because for me, I don't know how you guys are, but he was like the first person I lost of my generation. You're used to maybe a grandparent passing or something like that, but like when it's like someone who's actually younger than you or of your generation, it kind of hits you like, fuck, man, this is weird. And that was the first one, and then we lost Mick from 18 Visions, and there's been a couple of other, and even like recently with the Paris stuff, I had a lot of friends over there. They lived, but it was eerie to like, shit, man, it's like how fragile stuff is, you don't fucking think about it. We don't stop and think about it. And then they're not there. So yeah, I always think of that guy every day. And the guys like, man, how does that mean for the guys to go through it?
Yeah. I'm amazed that they just kept going that soon. Like, I think that's very, very impressive. Like if you think about a band like Alice in Chains, how long it took to get that thing restarted. But
I remember waiting for that for so long.
Yeah. And I love the new singer. I think that album they put out was phenomenal.
Yeah, they definitely had a resurgence. I think again, every band and everybody agrees differently. Like, AC/DC had a quick turnaround, and they got back on that horse and made a fantastic record with Back in Black. And I feel the same way with the Avenged guys. And I tell Matt this, I'm like, Matt, that is lyrically one of your best records, like hands down. Because I don't think the lyrics were done when Jimmy passed. Like the music was done, melody, top line, I think was there. And I could be wrong, but lyrically, I think he kind of revisited. And to me, like, I tell him, I was like, dude, that to me is the heaviest shit you've ever written, lyrically. Because I mean, Avenged, some of the lyric stuff in the past hasn't been really like, they kind of paint a picture, but it's not like,
Yeah.
But yeah, that Nightmare record was like, okay, wow, that's something to be proud of, because I can tell that you were going through some shit on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess as far as questions from the audience go, here's one that's not nearly as heavy. Giovanni Angel is asking, so when you're working with a new artist, what are some of the things you always try to discuss first to get them in the headspace to record, or even get yourself in the headspace to record them?
Ooh, I'm going through that right now, and I'm doing this rock record called a band called Hell or High Water, and it's branded from a Treyu side project that's more rock driven. So it's really about getting into, for me as a producer, is okay, where is this? Because we're making records, right? And we're not necessarily making music. Maybe the two are mutually exclusive. Sometimes they're not. But so where is this going to live in the marketplace? Because at the end of the day, I tell artists, whether they're signed or unsigned, is no one gives a fuck about your music. Okay? No, they don't. What they care about is, how can I market this? And there's nothing wrong with that. So you have to understand, okay, like, where is this going to live? Active, lifestyle, modern, alt, whatever it is. So that's the headspace I try to get into as far as, okay, what is the landscape right now? And what is this artist trying to do? And so I try to get that going. And then, okay, what does the artist need? Do they need co-writing help? Yes or no? Do they need more sonic signatures? For this band, Hell or High Water, they're this modern alternative rock record, but they're going to be marketed as an active rock band. So to me, it's all about, how can I sonically make this the most unique thing possible? So that's the headspace I'm in. They don't need songwriting help. They need a couple arrangement tweaks, but sonically it's like, okay, what vocal mic? So I went down and I shot out like 8 vocal mics on the singer. Okay, this is the one I want. Maybe we're going to use this on your background vocals. So kind of getting a game plan in that. I want single coil guitars. I want fuzzes. I want plexi amps. I want, flat wound on the bass. I want to do cymbals separate than drums on a couple songs. I want a 70s dead drum sound. So those are the things that I start to game plan. Those are the things I start to get the band stoked on. And like, hey, check out this record. Check out the vocal treatment on this. The other thing is, I tell the band, especially this band, is like, I want you guys not to be comfortable. I want you to go to a room. We're going to go to a room here in LA where a lot of great records have been made, and I want you to be uncomfortable. I want you to feel like you don't deserve walking into this room right now, because I want you to fucking be great. I don't want you to be good. I want you to be great. And I'm going to do the same, because I'm going to feel, there's no excuses. If all these hit records have been done here, the shit should be coming out slamming. So I try to get the band pumped up in that aspect, of get them like off their asses and get them like, okay, fuck, this is game time, because, this shit lives on forever. So if it's like, if it's an hour just to get one part, let's take the time to do it, because it's going to fucking be there forever. And it might just be a 30-second part or whatever. But so those are the type of research things that I try to do. And that's my headspace right now. That's what I'm talking about, is like just these sonic signatures of like, I'm looking to make this record stand out, And sometimes you're looking to make a record fit into the lane that it's going to exist. So I don't know if it's different for you guys, but that's kind of where, I try to game plan as much as possible, because producing a record is such a commitment, such an investment. It's like an emotional investment. It's what I mean? Like,
totally.
And especially with my wife, and I do some parts of the record at the house, like, she lives through the shit too.
How do you manage to balance that, Fred?
It's a constant. I don't think I do a great job some days, some days my work suffers and sometimes my marriage suffers. I think it's, what I mean? It's like, it's a never win.
Totally.
It's a fucking never win. But
you have kids?
No kids, just dogs.
All right, you got the easy end of the stick.
Yeah, dudes who have kids, I'm just like, what? I don't get it. I don't see how you guys do that.
It's really hard.
Yeah, Joel's got 3 kids.
Well, God bless him.
Well, Fred, thanks for being on the show, and it was great to see you in LA and meet you. And hopefully when I go back, we can hang out or something like that. Is there anything that you want to point people to before we close this up?
I mean, not really. I mean, I think point it back to what you guys are doing. I don't know how new the boot camp or nail the mix thing is, but I actually got to sign up for that. And but I just think what you guys are doing and the kind of the voices that you're championing, I really do sincerely mean it. It's like, thank you.
Well,
thanks.
Thanks for saying that.
Yeah,
we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, man.
And the fact that you do open up your secrets or your tricks, and some of that stuff is really cool, because some guys don't really do that, and it's cool to see that. And like I said, like, I'm still going through this 5-hour YouTube thing, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is heavy.
Awesome.
Well, we appreciate
Love
it. Thank you so much for being on. It was really interesting talking to you.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah, man, thank you.
The Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast is brought to you by Focusrite, supplying hardware and software products used by professional and amateur musicians, which enables the high-quality production of music. Focusrite, sound is everything. Visit Focusrite.com for more information. To ask us questions, make suggestions, and interact, visit urm.academy/podcast and subscribe today.